Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of BCS Community Connections Podcast. And today on the podcast, I have Mr. Robby Wilkerson. And Mr. Wilkerson is the owner of Sustainable Roofing, LLC here in the Bryan College Station area. And so today we brought him on the show, wanted to give him an opportunity to talk about his business. And it's a little more unique. We've had some roofers on the business before, or on the podcast here before, that we've talked to. And the first thing that I kind of thought about when him and I first got in contact with each other was we were talking about, sustainable and roofing, and it kind of led to a lot of questions on my side when I was doing the research and everything. We spent a little bit of time here in pre-show talking through some things, and definitely some information that we want to make sure gets out to the people who are out there who maybe have questions about it or want to see kind of where this fits, and especially with all of the recent storm damage and things that have been coming through. And we're in that season. It's just that time of season where this stuff happens. So we want to give him an opportunity to come on and talk about his business and see what he can do to maybe match up to what some of the needs are in the community as well, too, as he starts his business up. But before we get started on all of that, the first thing I want to do is I want to kind of flip it back to you and give you an opportunity to talk about your background a little bit, where you were born and raised. If it wasn't here, which I already know that it was, but if it wasn't, we usually tell people kind of talk about your background a little bit. So just tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of what your ties are here to the community.
Well, first and foremost, born here in Bryan, born at St. Joseph in 1984. I was young. There was a big construction boom on the northeast coast, and my dad was an iron worker. So we moved up to Virginia area for a number of years, where he was building skyrise buildings out there. When I was about 9 years old, we moved back to Texas, lived just outside of Austin for a little while, a little town called Kyle and Buda.
Yeah.
Quaint, used to be quaint little towns.
Yeah. I've had somebody else on the show, I think, that was from Buda, and it was like, but they were in Buda when it was nothing. It was literally just pastures and stuff. So
there used to be a break from where South Austin ended, and it was just pastures and fields. And then there was Buda, even a little bit of break, and then Kyle. Then there was a break in San Marcos, and then New Braunfels. Now it's
so
nonstop.
My wife and I are from San Antonio. When we went back not too long ago, we were in Cibolo. Most people may not know where that's at, but we've been in San Antonio long enough to know when there was nothing between basically almost Selma and till you got to New Braunfels. And then that break that you talked about was New Braunfels to San Marcos and San Marcos to Austin. I mean, that was it. There wasn't anything really in between there. And if there was something in between there, it was like gravel places, concrete construction places and things like that. It wasn't much of anything else out past that. So that's really kind of taken off and blown up out there as well, too. So spent some time there, and then
wound up moving to Navasota. Graduated Navasota High School 2002. Throughout that time, my family was always here between Bryan and Navasota Milliken area. My grandmother was the librarian for Bryan High for about 20 years in the late 70s, 80s, early 90s. And after graduating high school, moved back into Bryan area and been here ever since. Aside from I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit later on, moving up to Pacific Northwest. Yeah,
your trip out to the northeast or northwest out there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. So came back here, kind of settled in roots prior to coming back here, and we can go ahead and talk about it now. You got married, correct? And I guess your wife is from the northwestern area up there.
That's correct. That's correct. Born in Spokane.
Okay. Yeah. Y'all made a decision that y'all were going to roll back or to the area, I guess, and y'all ended up in the Portland area?
Just outside of Portland. We were in the metro area, a little town called Tigard, about 20 minutes from downtown Portland.
Yeah. So it's interesting we were talking about that. At the time frame you make that decision to relocate up there is right at the time where COVID hits, shutdowns happen. And for most people, if you're listening to this, you're probably in the Texas area. You might be somewhere else, but if you're in the Texas area, and I found this out recently when my wife and I took a trip, and we went to Florida. I mean, so of all the places that you kind of go, you think Texas and Florida are kind of the same or whatever. Mm-hmm. But we even found, like, when we went down there was a difference just between those two. And so you and I were kind of talking about the differences between going from Texas up into the Oregon area and how it's like night and day difference. Like, it was total lockdown.
Essentially, it was the same as California and New York.
Yeah.
As far as their approach. And level of seriousness and level of lockdown. It was funny, I forgot to mention earlier, before we moved up there, was talking with the missus, and we're like, well, what's life going to be like? Are we going to be successful in a new market? And I'll never forget, I said, well, I mean, unless we have some sort of great recession that we, had no idea. I did.
Spoke it into existence.
I did, and within 2 months of moving there, boom, COVID started hitting, and, just all sorts of different things.
Yeah.
It's been a wild ride.
So let's talk a little bit about, prior to you going there, you kind of move up there and y'all have kind of this plan of what you wanted to do. And you were talking about, we expect to go up there and meet people, make new friends, maybe start a business up there and get rolling. And then you realize that's kind of the furthest thing that you could possibly do in that particular location. Wasn't exactly business friendly. Not so much the fact we're not going to throw anybody under the bus to say that people were all hoarded up in their houses and didn't want to come out and meet any new guys, especially if you were from Texas at that point. Right. So, now it becomes, you go up there and you're like, okay, this probably isn't our best decision to be able to start up here. You make a decision to come back here.
Correct.
Okay,
correct.
And then y'all come back and relocate into the Bryan College Station area?
Yes, moved to downtown Bryan.
Okay.
Before moving to Portland, we'd actually thought about the place that we're living at now. We had taken a tour of it, and we were thinking, we really like the location. I mean, loft apartment right downtown overlooking, can see the Queen Theater from where we're at and everything. But we're like, well, it's kind of expensive. But after moving to Portland area, we realized, hey, that's really affordable. Coming back to town, we're like, hey, let's move here.
That's so interesting you say that. I just talked to a guy yesterday who was talking about he owns some land just outside of Austin. Mm-hmm. And not a lot, but he said, and he doesn't have a for sale sign in his yard or any of this kind of stuff, but he said over the last 2 months, he's gotten 8 cash offers to buy his place. Because most people that are moving from that area that are relocating in are moving in with cash in pocket, and they look at Texas as a value as compared to what you're paying out in those areas.
Absolutely.
So prior to going to the Oregon area, you were working in the roofing industry at that point. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Had gotten started about 6 years ago with a big company here locally. I've done construction stuff when I was a teenager, worked on remodeling houses, and, family's always been in it. Brother's a plumber right now.
Yeah.
I said dad was in construction on high-rise buildings. So, always kind of been familiar with the industry, but not as much with roofing. So got into it and started learning the ropes, learned a lot where I was at, and, kind of progressed from there.
And so was your plan when you went to Oregon, was it to take that roofing knowledge and everything else and kind of start up there, and that didn't materialize? Tell me about kind of how that was going to look for you.
No, we weren't planning on starting a business up there because we didn't exactly know what the market was going to be like.
Gotcha.
And we know
you just knew you wanted to be there.
Wanted to be there.
Right.
Just had an opportunity came in our life where financially it made sense. And as I'd mentioned, in pre-meeting, had celebrated our 2-year anniversary and decided we weren't ready to buy a house. We weren't ready to have kids yet. So if ever there was a time to move cross country and experience life, that would be it. Fresh into the marriage and apparently very naive, and but we just wanted to get up there and just live our lives. I was still doing roofing while I was up there, but no crazy ambition to start a business or anything. It was really more of just experience life and see the beauty of nature out there. And that's one thing, that I may have a lot of opinions of that area and the time that we moved, but one thing, absolutely the most positive is it's just beautiful.
Yeah. The first thing Robby told me when we sat down in pre-show is he's like, we lived in the area. It doesn't mean we were like the people in the area. He's like, we kind of fell more in the conservative range and that kind of stuff. So, but while you were up there, and what was interesting when we were talking in pre-show is you got to kind of talk about, if you talk about an area of the country that is eco-friendly and where everything is really met kind of at the ground really with sustainability, conservation, the key words that people tend to put to, when you're talking about the environment, the key buzzwords that are in there, you started talking about, like, this is really kind of where I started seeing things like with roofing, where they did things different up there, that essentially you don't see as much of down here, if at all, in some cases, where you talked about the ability for up there that they needed to make sure that there was ventilation process looked a lot different than what it looks out here. And then also the environment purposes of businesses that were down there. I mean, it all starts with a paper straw somewhere is kind of what I say in a lot of cases. Like, it starts with a paper straw and moves into other avenues. Exactly. And so in trying to study up a little bit and learning a little bit about, what does sustainable roofing look like, and that word sustainable, we were talking in pre-show also about the idea that as soon as a lot of people get in their mind that we're talking about some eco-friendly opportunity to change something that's being done, not necessarily that you got to buy in 100% to changing a lifestyle decision. Because listen, you're never going to sell me on a paper straw, right? It's just not going to happen, But talking about this isn't something that's invasive to that point where people think that they got to change something specifically that's going to affect them. This is really a decision-making process that cost-wise is still affordable to them. Is not, and again, sitting down with you, sitting there saying, okay, when I thought sustainable roofing, the first thing I thought is, okay, first thing you're going to have to do, Robbie, is you're going to have to explain to everybody, price increases and it's going to be more expensive and everything else. You're sitting down and going, that's the misperception about this.
Absolutely.
So in starting this business up, the misperception of using a word like sustainable or eco-friendly or something along those lines in the deal typically is met at the crossroads with a price increase somewhere, or somebody's going to have to pay a little bit more, or they're going to have to do something a little bit different. You were kind of explaining in pre-show, and we'll let you talk about that here in a little bit, where you're talking about it's really not lifestyle change. It's not met with your pocketbook. It's not any of these things. It's just making a decision. Do I want to do this a little different than what it would normally look like? But it's not being met with this, barricade that I got to figure out how to get over price wise, or figure out how to get over mentally and how I handle things. So you make the decision, you come back here and tell me about the decision to start sustainable roofing.
The decision to start, it came from, there's a saying about 2020 that it was the year of the side hustle. Everybody was just everybody got affected differently than others.
Sure.
But there are a lot of people out there that to make ends meet were having to, chase multiple different avenues.
Right.
I did, in 2020, I was still doing roofing, but it wasn't as lucrative as I'd hoped, working for another company. And so I found myself working in a kitchen. I found myself going on deliveries for a bait barn. I found myself doing bar backing, just anything that I could do to keep the bills, to keep going along. And one of the biggest reasons that I hadn't started a company before is because I was financially successful enough in those positions that it was a huge risk to try and branch off on my own.
Yeah. But
the struggles of 2020 and the amount of work that it took just to make ends meet already took all that fear away, because, I have the knowledge, but I don't have any, there's no downside to it. Why not?
Yeah.
That idea can now be fruitful without having to take a leap of faith. And so that's where we decided, okay, well, now's the time. We had...
Well, and probably easy to meet that with a, if not now, then when.
Yes.
Like if 2020 is not a good year to start it up after everything we've been through, we know we can survive in some of the worst conditions that we're going to be asked to live in probably. Why would I not take this leap at this point? And what we're seeing right now, hopefully in the economy, but what you're seeing with reopening and things like that, and a lot of the backing away from where everybody was at through quarantine and everything's, I don't want to say returning to normal, but you definitely can feel that there is this slide or this shift starting to happen.
Yes.
Along with that, what you're starting to see is you're also starting to see this recovery in the economy as well too, at least locally. I won't put that out into the universe across the entire United States or whatever, because we were still saying that Portland's still kind of in this standard of lockdown, and still kind of has that mentality of that. But we were talking today about I think the partners and I were sitting down this morning in our normal Wednesday get together, and we were talking about that locally people now are having problems hiring people. That it's all of a sudden it's the mentality shift of well, there's not really much we can be doing right now because we are on quarantine, lockdown, and it's 25%, 50%, whatever. And now that it's kind of opened back up, these businesses are starting to see rebounds in them. And now it's, okay, I got to go fill these holes, either that I created by furloughing someone, laying someone off, eliminating positions that now all of a sudden are needs again, that you're seeing the rebound starting to happen. And there aren't people filling those things. So this is kind of that same deal. Home building, home buying is becoming one of those deals right now that we're seeing this tremendous influx. It's probably one of the lowest on-hand inventory markets that Bryan College Station has seen in forever. Most home builders can't put them up fast enough at this point. But now all of a sudden, on top of all of that, with the recovery basis that's starting to happen, now we're in storm season, right? And things are now starting to happen. And so you literally were green lighted to go like 4 days before the major hailstorm that ran through here.
That's correct. So the storm was not a determining factor in opening this business.
Right.
We didn't get hail and then say, oh, hey, we're a roofing company.
Yeah.
It had been in the works, and just the timing of everything, literally 4 days. We got the green light from the state. Hey, your name's available. You are legit to do business. And then that Thursday, the hailstorm hit.
Yeah.
And so,
well, and we've had two major hailstorms hit back to back, almost within a month of each other. So we see the influx here at the business of roofers that are coming in, and they're buying signs and doing all the other stuff that they need in order to support their business. We were talking again in pre-show, and it was interesting because you actually said probably what some people were thinking, which is, unfortunately, in the roofing industry, you have every standard from Gold Star standard down to Shady Sean over here,
chucking
the truck that we were talking about, that's running around just trying to capitalize on an event. We see it all the time in any part of the town. You can literally kind of roll around after a major event like that, and you can see all kinds of stuff. People who have gone to Walmart and just bought the little letterings off the counter to stick something on the back of their window, to guys that are literally rolling around in company trucks. And one of the things, this is one of the interesting parts I think about roofing when I think about it, is most people who are looking to either put on a roof, repair a roof, whatever, really are looking for local businesses. This is one of those ones where you don't really have to sell that out real well to people. You don't have to be like, if not anything, they want you to be local, right? And more so, they want you to be local so that it's, if something happens, if there's a repair that's needed, if you fix it and I need you to come back for something, that you're literally like right down the road from me, that you don't have to come up from Austin, you don't have to come up from San Antonio, you don't have to come up from Houston. Yet you see this influx of people come from those areas after every storm. Not just there. There are people who come from Oklahoma, from Louisiana. And
it's interesting. So when you think local, I'd pretty much consider, obviously BCS, but I would consider Navasota, Brenham, Madisonville. I would consider those as local areas, but actually just had someone the other day that had asked me to come over. They're like, oh, well, we live in Brenham, but we know that you're not from here.
Yeah.
Not talking about us being in BCS, but we'd still like a quote. Well, in between that time and the appointment time, she called and she was like, I don't want you to waste your time. We just wanted to go with a local company. And I understand, so what an idea of local is can be different from person to person. But
yeah, when you start messing with people's potentially their biggest investment they're ever going to make in their life, it really becomes finding somebody in town that's trusted, has a good name, that can be that individual that's Johnny on the spot when you need them. Now, that leads into the second part of here, and we were kind of talking about you entering into a market that's also saturated to the point of you've got everything from major companies, been doing it for a long time, down to guys who are startup companies, and you being one of those guys right now. And then all of a sudden you get these guys who come in from out of town, out of state, that give a bad reputation, where these guys literally, they don't care if they get run off of a property by a police officer or whatever. They're just going to roll around, knock on a bunch of houses, and they become they become almost irritants. I think what tends to happen is I think the community is well informed enough and they're quick enough to react. I was talking about the Nextdoor app kind of being that kind of interesting contact. I mean, you got Facebook and all these other things, but Nextdoor is kind of where people go in their local neighborhood to kind of share information back. And you can just go through there, and during that time frame in that first week to 2 weeks after the storm, you can see all these people like, I had some guy show up, knock on my deal, didn't have any markings on his car, asked for his card about, the city issues out a license for him to be able to door knock, asked for a business card, doesn't have any of these things, and then I'm like, get out of here. Well, then the next guy who is legit, that is potentially local, that shows up, is now tainted by the guy before, because the first thing they're doing is they're open door like, oh gosh, it's another roofer, And so you were saying that, you were like, unfortunately in our business, there's a lot of shadiness that happens in there, especially when you start dealing with guys that are out of town, that aren't local, who now all of a sudden their name's not spread around town. They don't have people in town that will vouch for them, or, that have known them since they were a kid, or whatever the case may be, so you kind of understand that because you have family that's been here, that grew up here, that had roots in here from school systems and from building and everything else. And then realizing, listen, as I start my business up, I have this responsibility also at that lineage of people who have worked hard to establish themselves in town, to know that I'm an extension of that as well too, that I want to make sure that when the Wilkerson name is being put out there in this particular deal, that it's being put out on a positive side, and it's not met with people, oh great, or that Robby guy's running around here again.
And the same thing, not only the Wilkerson name, but roofing in general.
Sure.
It's twofold, not only me as a person, but me as a roofer.
Yeah.
To be able to change that mentality of, one house at a time, one roof at a time, make a positive impact where people don't have to go, here comes the roofer. Here's
an interesting part to think about. If you're out there, and let's say you've got storm damage or something like that, there's not a single roofer that can handle all the damage that comes through here. No. There's always enough for everybody, right? And especially in those types of events where they happen. Now, whether or not that roofer is subcontracted through with a builder, whether or not they're Johnny on the spot after an event that happens, a lot of the times the roofer mentality is right after event, I got to get to these places, to these homes, to start, going door to door or whatever, and saying, hey, I'd love to get up on your roof and check out to see if you have any damage to help you out. Mm-hmm. And again, now all of a sudden I'm sitting out there, I find myself in a situation where somebody comes knocking on my door. The first thing that I want to know is, are they local? I'm probably, quite honestly, I'm in the same boat. I'm probably not putting anybody on my roof that is not from here in town, or doesn't have a business here in town that I can reference back to, right? Mm-hmm. Whether that's ask questions of people who've used them, or people who've interacted with them, or whatever. And then this really for you is a relationship job. And so we're talking about in previous jobs also, you did a lot of sales work where you were calling on customers and things along those lines. So you kind of get the idea of what people are looking for and the approach that needs to be taken on the backside of there to put people at ease. Because you also understand, I know people probably don't want, their door being knocked on 6 times in a day by guys that are looking to get up on their roof to check if they've got any damage up there. But I also want to leave this impression with them that I'm memorable enough that they'll remember me, mm-hmm. and not for a bad reason, that if something happens that I'm their go-to guy if they need to. Maybe I hop up there and there's nothing going on. Hey, you were lucky, man. It totally missed you, because the other part in that industry that we talked about, and this was very interesting. I remember when I was talking to another roofer, his comment was how many times do house owners get on their roof? It's almost like you throw the house up and you never get up there for anything. The only time I may have been on my roof ever was for 2 reasons. One, to hang Christmas lights, which that was pretty stupid because I wasn't very comfortable getting up on the roof to begin with. But then second on that, my kid throws something up on the roof or something like that. But I'm not up there walking around and checking out to see, do I have any damage? Did anything roll through there? And so there are people that are in town for that, maybe for the first time ever, know that that's a need that they've got to have addressed.
Exactly.
And, listen, if you're like me, man, I'm good at about 4 feet off the ground. That's about where my comfort level falls in real well. And then they get somebody that's rolling through out there. A lot of the times, unfortunately, when they know there's that need, they've got to meet that need with that person who's standing there in front of them. But it's a first impression. It's a first impression business, by hands down, right?
Absolutely. People are doing business with people. Even as a smaller company versus a larger company, some may, have that sense of comfort just to go with a larger company, even if the particular representative they aren't crazy about. But for the majority of it, it's all about that personal relationship that you build. And that's what I want to make. I want to make people comfortable. There's no need to have to be standoffish or defensive. I want to approach everything as if, how would I want someone to interact with my grandmother who, she doesn't have a whole lot of money to throw at a roof, doesn't know the industry, isn't familiar with how insurance works. I want to handle it in a scenario that I would want someone to handle going to my grandmother's house. So.
Yeah. And when you got somebody there that's potentially, let's say they're commission driven from that larger company, they're sending them out, hey, land us X number of jobs, we give you X number of dollars, right? Mm-hmm. That commission base sometimes kind of creates the, I got to get them hooked in on this one, right? And then that becomes a little bit too long engaged conversation that then becomes the nagging, becomes the over the top, becomes the annoyance, becomes the get off my property, that kind of stuff. And not saying that everybody's in that boat. I think when you talk about longer established companies, like you said, it's not necessarily, maybe that potential client is willing to tolerate the individual that's in front of them at the expense of knowing, okay, well, I know the business has been around for 20, 30 years or whatever. Exactly. And so it's one person, maybe it's just isn't their best sales guy or whatever, but when it's the entrepreneurship of it's your business, you're the guy standing in front of them. You're the one that's facilitating the repair. You're potentially the guy that's up on top, even, tearing and staring down whatever the damage is that's up there. And so, and we were talking about that again in pre-show, I don't necessarily, if I had, I was telling you about some roof things that I had in the past, I don't necessarily look for the long 10, 20, 30-year company that's out there, because the concern that I would have there is am I just a number? Yeah. Is it just the fact that, I'm one of 100 that you wrote this week? I'm looking for the guy that, here's my cell number. Call me if you need something. I'm going to be in contact with you. And also the other part that you run into is, after a major event like that, and you go to some of the longer standing companies that are out there as well too, it's we can get to you. It'll be about 2 weeks. In the meantime, we'll throw a tarp up on your roof, and that'll prevent anything from coming in there, and then we can get back to it. Yeah. Well, listen, I'm not saying I'm the most upstanding person in my HOA community area there or whatever, but I definitely don't want a tarp on my roof for 2 weeks. Exactly. And so the ability for somebody to quickly turn around and get on the job and start getting it repaired so that I don't look like an eyesight, problem within my community, which may look a little different. I mean, if I've got 30 other neighbors that all have tarps on their places as well too, every person wants it repaired as fast as possible. And so sometimes that smaller business person is the guy who's I can get started on it tomorrow. I can get out there. I've got a crew that I can, run out to you, and we can go ahead and start getting ready to go and getting it done. Well, again, I need dependability. I need, I'm going to say I personally need fast turnaround, that it's not sitting there forever, or I'm not in this queue of customers that I got to wait to get through. And I want somebody that I can trust, and trust probably being at the top side of that with everything. And so, and then everything else can kind of bleed off of that. So in your interaction, especially being brand new, every interaction that you have is an opportunity to build trust with somebody that may potentially be a customer down the road, especially when that interaction is happening outside of an event. Inside of an event is really where all the vultures come out, right? Yes. Everybody's on top of them. But what happens after the event and what happens in between events is a matter of, meeting somebody where they need you to meet them at. Not necessarily like, hey, I got a hole in my roof. It might just be, hey, listen, I swear last night when I was sleeping, I heard something scratching up in my attic or whatever. And I don't know if maybe there's a point there where something's gaining access in there, or, maybe I do have a hole that a squirrel's chewed into or whatever. So as you kind of get this opportunity, that face-to-face opportunity with them, which is probably the best way to meet them.
Absolutely.
As opposed to trying to communicate with them over the phone. That face-to-face opportunity starts with that opportunity to build, okay, first off, this is my company, Sustainable Roofing LLC is my company, but I want you to know I'm Robby Wilkerson first. Before I was Sustainable Roofing LLC, I'm still Robby. Yeah. And I want you to be able to know me as Robby first, and then I'll introduce you into what I can do for you with my company, right?
And that's what I love. I'm not sole owner, co-owner with my wife, JC, as well. And the appointments that we have, we try to coordinate with her schedule on making sure she can be there as well, because we're a family-owned and partners in this. And that's what we're just introducing. We're just a couple here locally that are just trying to do a good job.
Sure.
And it's not a sneak attack of like, let's bring this other good cop, bad cop or anything like that. Yeah. It's just us as people and sharing the vision that we have for, why we feel we're a better fit to put the roof on than maybe some other people you've talked to.
Yeah. And so let's get into the background from what you chose to name your company here. So this is kind of where, I guess, literally the rubber meets the road here. So yes. Sustainable Roofing LLC. And again, like I told you in researching this, that it was, the first thing I thought is, okay, I think sustainable and I think roofing. So what kind of materials are we talking about? And so I kind of go online and start looking at a bunch of stuff to try and figure out what sustainable materials are. And I think in a lot of cases, people, I included, was thinking, okay, I'm going to flip onto this and I'm going to find, here's a shingle covered in grass, or something like that. Like it's going to be something way out there, right? But then when I started looking at it, it's a lot of materials that are already in existence, mm-hmm. that are already being put on houses, mm-hmm. But is being, from your standpoint, you're bringing in more so the education purpose behind this. Like, here's some of these materials and here's why it's important that these materials maybe become a part of this process. Mm-hmm. So that's really kind of what I want you to speak on. So I wrote down some stuff, just, and these were things, and you can jump in here at any given point, but I wrote down some materials that are considered, I guess, sustainable by evidence of, and when we say sustainable,
the preconception that comes.
Yeah, we probably need to define that word. So sustainable, I'll let you kind of make that definition, because sustainable is not just necessarily like, I saved a bird, and, these kind of things. So
multiple definitions on that.
Okay.
And throughout the process, we try to touch base on each one of those. Sustainable could be, it's a product that has a high reflectivity to make sure that those UV rays don't make it into your attic, and that everything is cooler. It can be sustainable. Metal obviously is a very sustainable product. Whenever the lifespan of that roof is over, those materials can be recycled. Clay tiles, obviously a natural resource, mm-hmm. so you're not bringing a bunch of chemicals involved and things like that. So sustainability can not only come from the materials themselves, but it can also be what they provide for your house. So like the metal has a high reflective rate.
Right.
So whenever your attic is cooler, then your energy costs are down, which means the power plants aren't running as hard, all of these different things. So as far as those materials go, that's the biggest part of it.
Well, and it has a branch. Like you were saying, it has a bunch of definitions to it, but those definitions relate to where are they sustainable? Where do they help the environment, right? Exactly. So, you'd mentioned metal, you mentioned clay. And again, I don't know that I've seen it on any roofs, but wood was one of them that I put on here. Mm-hmm. Concrete and slate, mm-hmm. Which, I don't know that my pocketbook can hold down slate. I know how expensive it is. But even so, then you have materials and things like you've got asphalt as a part of that, which again, asphalt material for topside roofing is, I'm assuming, recyclable whatever, tires, rubber, whatever gets put into the landfill to be able to create that. And then there was something called a green roof. And so those were kind of some of these things that were kind of all encompassed into what's considered sustainable. Not everything obviously included into that. But so what I wanted to talk about is let's look at some of your most common material that you're using. And then I want you to talk a little bit about that material and how it becomes eco-friendly for you to be able to use with your clients that are out there that are looking to, whether it's repair their roof, whether it's put a brand new roof on, or whether it's ground up build and you're going to be the roofer that's going to be doing the sub work on that. So most common material that you're using?
Most common material is going to be an asphalt shingle.
Okay.
You know, we touch base on all the other roofing materials that are out there that are sustainable but can break the bank.
Right.
What we wanted was a slightly different approach, because you can find those at almost every roofing company.
Yep.
What you can't find is an approach on your standard shingle roof. And that begins not only with the material, but the ventilation process of it. That from being up in Portland and having the issues with ventilation up there, where if the ventilation isn't 100% balanced with intake and exhaust, you get mold growth. So I learned exactly how to calculate proper airflows, which for them, the heat part isn't so much of an issue. It was all about getting the moisture out of the attic space,
humidity.
getting the humidity out of the attic space. But that immediately clicked with me that back in Texas, if we could get these proper airflows, immediately your house is going to be more efficient. Your AC is not going to have to work as hard, and the lifespan on it's going to be longer. Your energy costs are going to go down. And the cooler it is in your attic, the longer your shingles are going to last. Because when it gets too hot up there, you get premature aging and issues like that. So that was first and foremost, getting the ventilation, and then the products from there. You know, the science and engineering for the building products has come a long way. And so the timing of this company and the timing of the materials that are available are coincide really, really well. There's a certain brand out there called Malarkey that from the beginning, even before they make the shingles, the processing plant itself, originally up in Portland, they've now got them in Portland, California, and the ones we get are out of Oklahoma. But the manufacturing plant in Portland is all about, even in itself, being sustainable and how they reuse different items in the manufacturing process, which transmits over to the shingles. So every shingle they make is going to be made from anywhere from 25 to 33% recycled materials. So, and a standard size roof is like keeping 5 tires and 350 milk jugs out of the landfill. Okay. And that's without even recycling the shingle at the end of its lifespan. Yeah. That's before it ever even gets on your house. You've already saved that amount from the landfill. On top of that, they've teamed up with 3M, and they have what's called a smog reducing granule. So the technology behind this is really fascinating. So the granules, the shingle itself, first and foremost, functionality, same as everything else out there. Just like our company, we're a roofing company and we want to keep the moisture out. We want to put a great roof. Same thing with the shingles. They know that first and foremost, they're an asphalt shingle and performance is everything, but they took a better approach to it by incorporating the recycled materials and teaming up with 3M and using their technology to be able to convert CO2 into nitrogen. So in essence, reducing smog, improving air quality. So a standard size roof, putting on a Malarkey shingle with the 3M granules is like planting 2 mature trees in your yard. Where we were talking earlier about, you think about sustainability, you think, oh, well, I'm going to have to change my lifestyle and it's going to be crazy expensive. Yeah. This is the easiest thing. These shingles cost the same as every other major brand out there, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to change your lifestyle. You hire us, we do this roof, we get your ventilation where it needs to be. The planet's in a better spot than it was by just going with another company and another shingle. I mean, it's as simple as that.
So tell us a little bit about how that shingle works. I was kind of interested where you're talking about how it kind of takes in the smog or whatever, but then what happens when it rains?
So the granules themselves have a certain capacity of the converted CO2 into nitrogen that they can hold. Well, once it reaches that point, then it slows off on its production. But then as soon as it rains, it washes the nitrogen off of the granules, and the nitrogen makes its way down into your yard and actually fertilizes your yard, because nitrogen's a key ingredient to fertilizing plants.
Right.
And so every time it rains and it washes that nitrogen off, it resets the life cycle of the granules to convert more smog into nitrogen and just keeps the cycle going for the.
As a visible point here, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference probably between a regular shingle and one of these nitrogen shingles, right?
Exactly. You would have no idea. All the same color palettes are available. It's the same, style, whether 3-tab or architectural. There's absolutely no way that you would be able to tell from one roof to the next that one is just a standard asphalt roof, and the next one is as if they have 2 mature trees in the front yard and they're fertilizing their grass with every time that it rains. And
so, talking about when we talk about the services that you offer, and as a roofer, obviously the number one service is going to be putting whatever it is, new roof, repair roof, whatever it is. I mean, it's in the title of it. But then when you were discussing earlier about ventilation is typically not something that as somebody is looking for something because again, I'm calling a roofer when I need a roof. But let's say my house is just hot in general. And I know that it's being generated from the attic. I know that, it's 105 outside in July and, my attic is blazing hot, which then again is sitting down on my ceiling side and is just warming each room that it's a part of. And we were talking about that ventilation process and that really not making that tie back to the idea of using a roofer to go up, inspect the ventilation inside of the attic and see, okay, is this something where we can alleviate some of this buildup that's in your attic just by simply changing the structured format of what you have? Because we're talking about most common ventilation in Texas homes are going to be a little spin turbine on top, right? Maybe a couple of those. And then what's my appropriate term for them? The ridge vent. I had it backwards there. So
no worries.
But those are typically the first things when somebody is talking about, okay, well, we need to cool down the attic and take more heat out. Usually the first thing is, well, let's put some more ridge vents in, right? And that's usually not the quick repair. Probably is the quick repair, but not necessarily the one that it is the thing that could potentially have a bigger impact.
It can have the exact opposite effect, actually. And that's when we talk about ventilation, you have intake ventilation, which is the bottom side of the roof, typically what we call the soffit, is where the air comes in. That's your intake. Your exhaust is at the peak of the roof, and that's your ridge vent, your wind turbines, everything like that. You want to have 50% intake, 50% exhaust. Here in Texas, typically when somebody says my attic is too hot, they go, oh, you need more exhaust ventilation. Let's put another wind turbine up there. Let's cut in for some more ridge vent. And that's it's not the proper way to go about it, because you have to have, just like in electricity, you have one solid circuit where if anything interrupts in between, it breaks that cycle, and it's called short circuiting.
Right.
Same thing with air ventilation. You want the air to come in at the bottom and out at the top. If you have intake ventilation at the bottom that's proper, but maybe not quite enough ridge vent, people say, well, let's throw a couple wind turbines up there. That's going to get you, the more exhaust ventilation. Well, that's actually incorrect, because if you think of a circuit coming up both sides, if you add in a wind turbine down here, that breaks that circuit, and you create a flow just right here at the top of your roof. And nothing's going on down at your ceiling level, which is exactly where the majority of the heat comes from. So you have to have that balanced approach. And sometimes there are even houses that have no intake ventilation, especially older homes that have open rafter tails, where you can actually see the 2x6s outside of the house. Right. Those typically don't have any intake ventilation whatsoever. So if someone puts a ridge vent up there, it's useless because air is not coming from anywhere. So something that has not been readily available in our area is called intake ventilation or edge venting. And that's where we come in on the bottom side of the roof, cut in for intake, and then we have these vents that go, it's a low profile, maybe half an inch or so, but allows air to come in to tie in with the ridge vent that you have up there. And those are conversations that I'd never had 5 years of roofing in Texas until I got up to the Portland area, because again, if it's not 100% balanced flow, mold growth within 2 weeks. Right. It's a huge, huge insurance liability, health reasons, all of those different things, but it applies exactly the same way here, but for energy conservation, not necessarily mold growth.
Yeah, we're humid here. It's not the kind of humidity that you get up in the Northwest. more so for us, it's that humidity that hits the heat here that, just burns, feels like it'll burn you to the ground when you're out there. But the opportunity for you to even be able to go in and, again, thinking of the roofing side of the business is going to be on the outside on my roof, not really thinking about that, of being able to go in there and go, well, let's go take a look and, let me get up in there and find out what kind of flow you do have. In talking about adding the stuff to the top where you create the circulation, you were saying it maybe lowers the temperature up near where your vent is, but it doesn't do anything down low, which is essentially where the problem is at. You're trying to get that heat that's on the top side of your ceilings up in the attic, up out that exhaust vent, Exactly. So going through that process and walking through that, those are also opportunities where you can go and, man, I'm over here, Robbie, I'm spending $350, $400 a month on electricity. My AC is always running. I already recharged it. I had somebody come out and check the AC system and everything else, but it's always running. Well, again, once you hop up in the attic kind of tells the story, right? It may tell the story that there's damage in the attic, that is allowing penetration of some heat that normally wouldn't be allowed or wouldn't normally be met with proper airflow. To, okay, you don't have proper airflow. It's just the way that the house was built, whether it's older, whether that's not a high priority when building a home, that you can then come in and make some recommendations on how you can alleviate some of that to keep that going. So in the sustainable parts of the asphalt tiles and things along those lines, you still offer out the other stuff. You still offer, if somebody says, okay, Robbie, I want clay roof or I want a metal roof or whatever. Those are still things that you have the availability and the option to be able to do for folks.
Yeah, and same with other, even in shingle brands and manufacturers.
Right.
If you aren't crazy, if you've never heard of the Malarkey shingle before, but you've had a great experience on a previous roof with a Certainteed or an Owens Corning or anything like that,
sure,
we can put that on for you. We want to spread the word that this in our mind, better options for the environment is out there for a comparable price, if not the same price.
Right.
So we're not stuck to any one thing.
You're not trying to be 100% all inclusive to only these higher quality. I won't say higher end, higher quality. I almost said higher end, higher quality materials that people can still meet with, like we were saying, if they feel like they need to do their part. Or it's something that's just, I want to feel like this is something that I can make a decision on that'll make an impact on my environment, on the environment around me. And I really don't have to do anything other than allow you to go up there. I'm going to have to replace the roof anyway, but you go up there and you replace it with these nitrogen, shingles that then allow an opportunity to offset some of the carbon base that's out there. Great. Here we go. And you put it on, I don't have to think about it again. Yep. And it just does what it does for the next 10, 15, 20 years, hailstorm, whatever it is. I mean, I'd love to tell you that there's that roof that is always going to be protected against, golf ball, softball size hail. But the reality is, even if you put a metal roof, for example, on your house, met with a baseball, softball size hail, it's probably not going to make much of a difference of what's going to happen to your roof having to be addressed, other than sound a whole lot louder than a regular.
There's not a roofing material made that is hail proof.
Right.
And going back to the sustainability part, there's so many different avenues that you can approach those Malarkey shingles. Every shingle that they make has a hail impact rating, anywhere from a 2 to a 4. And that ties back to the sustainability. If a storm comes through, you have a hail impact rated shingle, your neighbor doesn't, boom. 5 years down the road, they just had to get another roof, and that's another X amount of thousands of pounds of waste going to the landfill while your roof is still fine. And you're also not having to pay another deductible and going through this whole process. So all sorts of different avenues to where these one particular shingles, are sustainable in a way. I just don't want people to think, like you were saying, sustainable, you have a preconceived notion of what it is. First and foremost, a roofing company is all we are. We're not going to show up and just start preaching to you about how terrible we are as humans or anything like that. Yeah. I want to put a good roof on.
Do you want your kids to have an earth here?
Exactly. Yeah. No, if you prefer a different type of shingle, we've got you. That's no problem.
Right.
We're not going to have a 20-minute conversation about why you have to do this one thing. It's just every homeowner that I meet with, I want there to at least touch base on ventilation and be able to at least touch base on the shingles that are available that can improve the environment. And that's it. It's as simple as that.
Well, and you especially want to be addressing that stuff. Let's say it's a full roof repair all the way down to decking, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're doing an entire deck change and everything else, that's really at that moment where that conversation about ventilation and what you had before really becomes important, because it's a lot easier to fix it if you're doing an entire change out as opposed to it's existing. Now we've got to kind of like, okay, we're going to have to map this out a little bit. Where are these vents going to go? We were talking about the increase in OBS, on boards and stuff. And I think it's an interesting conversation, because with the increase, there's a lot of little memes out there and stuff where people were talking. I think I saw one actually this morning that it had like the DEA or something in the background, and it had this whole table stacked full of 2x4s, and it said something like amount of recovery 1.3 million that was attached to it. Because basically right now in the market, virtually all wood, OBS especially, which is your decking material. I think we were talking before we came on I think it's 3 times the rate that it was 6 months ago, right? Just for that sheet. That sheet probably, for most roofers at one point, was probably somewhere between $13 to $16 a sheet. Now that sucker, you can go to Home Depot or Lowe's and it's sitting out there like $38.
Yeah, even at 45 in some places. And that's the, 1/2-inch oriented strand board. That's not even true plywood. If you go 3/4 inch true plywood, it can be $80.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
For a 4-foot by 8-foot sheet. I mean, it's outrageous.
Yeah. So what would be normally, let's say you do a roof repair or whatever, and people are going, well, I talked to my neighbor and they had their roof repaired last year or replaced, and they spent $10,000 on it. You're like, I remember those days.
Yes.
Those were nice days. Now all of a sudden it's the idea of also keeping in contact with what is going on in the market. And most roofers are going to be able to explain that uptick, especially when you're talking about, if I'm looking to replace a roof and I don't have a roofer that I've used before, or I've never had a need for one, what's usually the first thing I'm going to do? I'm usually going to reach out to friends and family who've had one done. And then what they're going to do, oh yeah, man, I got my entire roof replaced by this guy and it was X dollars, right? Now all of a sudden your expectation in hearing that from a roof that was replaced, whatever, a year ago, 2 years ago or whatever, is at the old pricing. And the pricing now is on the incline. I won't say it's, because I don't think it's probably even gotten to where it's going to end up resting, which, just seems to be going higher and higher and higher. But the roofers are going to be able to also, if you go and have contact with a customer, you're going to be able to explain, like, here's some of the increases in prices. This is what this looks like. But this is also where you get to meet that customer with their need. Let's say, for example, this is hail damage. And now all of a sudden they're looking at a roof repair that needs to happen, but it's also materialized into an insurance claim. And so one of the biggest pains in the butt for homeowners is dealing with their insurance to get things done. And so what helps the cause better than anything else is having a reputable, knowledgeable, let's say, partnership, because that's really what this kind of becomes. And they have that partnership with that roofer where they can turn around and say, listen, I've got this, insurance. Here's my information. Here's my contact person. I've started the claim with them already. And now all of a sudden, here's where you come in to really be an advocate for that customer. So we're talking about, the way that would normally look is they're opening up a claim on it. You've probably shown up on site at some point and said, look, you got a bunch of holes up here. And, you have insurance on the house. Now is probably a good time to go ahead and start opening that claim up, and let's see what your insurance will do. Most of the time, they're going to send out an adjuster to come and make their expert opinion, where in most cases, those guys are not doing roofing every day, but they're evaluating prices and replacement on roofing. Now they come out, and then you really want that opportunity where you can then turn around and meet back with your client and say, okay, let me see what the adjuster has, valued all these things at, and did they catch everything? So that's the opportunity where you're up on there and you know everything from ground up of what that thing's going to take to get it repaired. And then you can then come as the advocate for the client to say, okay, look, they left this out. or here's something that they didn't value it. And I want you to talk a little bit about that, because you were talking about some things where insurance companies sometimes try to cut corners to save themselves money. And in return, you kind of then can advocate to your client to go, listen, these are probably some things you should probably go back and make reference to. Mm-hmm.
And so a best case scenario, I'll just start on, the homeowner and roofer relationship. If you have a roofer that you're comfortable with to handle the claim, then really the only part of the process that you have to be hands-on with is calling your insurance company first and foremost.
To get it started.
From there, if you get approved, have someone that you're comfortable with, they can be your representative and they can talk you through the entire process. If there's anything the insurance left off, we'll reach out to them directly as the expert. Hey, we need to make a supplemental claim on such and such flashing. It was damaged by the hail. It's a necessary part of this roof to refresh it back to pre-loss condition, essentially. There might be 20 to 30 line items on an insurance claim. And, everybody's human. Just same thing with the adjuster. They may have had a really busy day and they just forgot that one piece, and the insurance company goes, oh, you know what, you're completely right. We'll pay for that. Or it could be someone that's just inexperienced, because who knows if your adjuster has been doing this for 10 years or if they just got out of class 2 weeks ago because they're in a mad dash to train new people because we're in storm season. And that's a thing,
Well, and also for you, I mean, we talked back to the idea that you're creating, you're building your relationship, you're building your reputation here in town. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about how you get to find out how good your insurance really is when you have a claim, right? Whatever insurance that is, auto claim, house claim, whatever. But you get to find out how good your insurance is really in that moment of need. And so, but like we were saying before, there ain't an insurance company out there that's out there advocating really for their person who spent the money. Like, let's go out and get you the absolute best quality roof that we can get you to replace that. Ultimately for them, those guys are looking at, we're going to cover this, mm-hmm. but our goal here also is to minimize the out of pocket as well too. Like, we're not, if that roof costs, high-end roof replacement, $30,000 to replace your roof with high-quality materials. But, we're going to cover that. And you were talking about like the devaluation sometimes that people find out about their insurance, where they haven't had actual replacement value cost at that point. They've had just replacement cost, which maybe then takes into consideration how long the roof has been sitting up there and what it's valued at in its current condition as of today.
Yeah, and that's a definite conversation that I was looking forward to having today. Is even, a lot of the people out there right now may not be going through a claims process.
Right.
Let's say that you were lucky enough to not have had hail. Take a look at your policy. There's actually, it's reverse what you said, ACV.
Sorry,
actual cash value is the one that you don't want to have.
Right. That's the low end. That's the current condition replacement.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. And so if you have a 30-year roof, not a 30-year-old roof, but a 30-year roofing material, and your roof is 20 years old with an ACV policy, they're only going to give you 10 years worth of lifespan on that roof. So you're going to have to bridge that gap and pay for 20 years worth of life on it. Mm. Whereas if you have an RCV policy, your roof can be a 30-year roof and it can be 25 years old, and they're going to give you the full amount of what it takes to put that roof on today, minus your deductible.
Right. In today's current cost conditions.
Correct. Not what it cost to put on 25 years ago.
Exactly.
So that's first and foremost. Definitely take a look at your policy, because you're talking maybe a difference of $10 a month versus $7,000-$8,000 that whenever something does actually happen.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So then you get the opportunity again to help that client. Let's say they do have that. Well, you want to make sure that everything that you're putting up there, again, it's going to be tied back to your name. It's not going to be tied back to the insurance, right? Like, nobody goes back in there and goes, look, Allstate put a roof up on there. Look at that roof that Allstate built for me. Mm-hmm. That ain't how that works. It's listen, I used X, roofing company over here, and that's what I've got up top there. And so if the insurance company has only paid to do certain things in there, where you were talking about it leaving out specific things, that's very common in the roof replacement insurance part of it, where they want you to reuse materials, go through and well, this really, you don't really need new ones of this. Your one's still in good shape, so you can take that out and just to reply it back in. I mean, it's like piecing together. Here's brand new parts and here's used parts that we want to replace back to, right?
And that's where, with having a reputable roofing company, even if insurance isn't paying for those things, it may not be something that we can supplement and get them to pay for, but we're going to go ahead and replace it anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's those little components. You want a full, fresh new roof.
Yeah.
You want it to be as pristine as the first day that it was put on. One thing I forgot to mention in the claims process, why to hire an experienced roofer is because when we're up on the roof with those adjusters, they'll put it on us to gauge the age of the roof, and you have to know the signs to look for to accurately represent the age of the roof. You may have an inexperienced roofer that says, "Oh yeah, I'd say this roof's about 20 years old." Boom, they write that down, and that's what they're going to put on the policy. They like to put it on the roofer because they know that they'll potentially throw a number out there that is worse than it actually is,
right? And
it saves them money. Where I can get up there and I can tell you within 2 to 3 years of age exactly how old the roof is based off of granule loss, doing a brittle test on the shingles, algae growth. And that's the darkening of the shingles. You'll see some roofs that have like those black streaks and things like that. I know exactly how many years it takes for those to start to develop and how many years it takes for it to fully cover a roof. So those are the ways where, with having done this for 6 years, knowing exactly what to say, what not to say when you're talking to the adjuster, because it can and will be held against you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and also, I've never had to do a roof repair through an insurance company. I've had to do a bunch of repair stuff through car insurance companies and things like that. So then it's kind of met with, what's really interesting there is that first initial contact, like when you're dealing in the automotive side, is here's some places you can take your car to, right? Like they give the recommended repair places, right? And then, but it's not met with you can take this wherever you want, and so that really kind of falls in the same line as a roofer. If I've got a roofer that I'm comfortable with, that I've been using, there's typically nothing in a policy that's written that says you're going to have to use our roofing company that we send to you, that we contracted out, right? You can sit there and say, listen, this is my guy. I want to know, what are we talking about for replacement purposes? How much is my part going to be? And then how much are you guys pitching in on this backside to repair this roof? And then more so in the idea that if I've got a roofer that I can trust and that I know that their decision making and what needs to be replaced and repaired is not just met at first with, okay, how can I get more money in my pocket here? It's met with what's the right thing to do in this situation for this client? Because this is my roof that's going to be on here for the next 25 years. I want to make sure that they talk highly of this roof, not just going, yeah, man, it wasn't like 6 months after that roof went on and I had a leak up in the attic, or I had to replace drywall because the ceiling got wet in this spot because they didn't replace the flashing here, or they, didn't go back through and repair this particular spot or whatever. And especially if you're not doing full roof replacement, you're doing patchwork or you're doing a spot repair, it becomes even more critical at that point that you've got a reliable person there for you. It's one thing to take a roof off and replace it ground up, and it's another thing when you're having to do patchwork repair. And a lot of the times in patchwork repair, that's sometimes met with a client that maybe either their insurance isn't covering a full roof replacement, or they don't have the money for the insurance part of it. And so now it's like, well, I just need to get to a point of just getting this fixed.
Or they may not have insurance at all.
Exactly.
It could have been a family home that's been there for 60 years, and so this is fully out of pocket, and insurance was never even an option.
Yeah.
And that's why I pride myself in leak detection, being able to find those small repairs, the issues where, hey, well, I've actually had 2 other roofers out here, and they said they think it's this, but they weren't sure. And I get up there, and within 2 minutes, go, that's a problem right there. And then I'll even do a water test, take a water hose and test it, and it leaks. And how did you know that? Because that's just kind of my specialty. Sometimes you have a knack for something. So I love the leak detection part of it. So that comes in with those small repairs, and then I carry the tools and materials in my truck for some of the more minor repairs. You'll actually see me up on a roof getting dirty and tearing shingles off and actually repairing it myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and especially there's dead giveaway things when you're walking through there and you're on top of a roof and you're like, Here it is right here. This is the soft spot. Let's find out what the damage is up underneath here. And how far does that stretch out? You know, it may be that one spot where there's a penetration point, but it doesn't necessarily mean because there's this penetration point here, I've got to go 5 foot out this way, 5 foot out this way. And so, again, this is the moment where your roofer can become your best friend and sitting there saying, like, listen, there's no need for you to spend this. Spend this, let's get it repaired, and you're good to go. As opposed to, oh, man, if this were my roof, this is what I'd do. I'd change the whole side here. I'd replace this whole portion of this. And then all of a sudden you're in a field of working outside of a range that roofer didn't necessarily need to be diving off into. And so when we talk about being an advocate on the insurance side of it, there's also just the advocate of just doing the right thing when you're an experienced roofer with knowledge up there, and like, listen, I got a 90-year-old lady that's downstairs here that is living on Social Security. You know, the last thing I'm going to do is go down there and go, I bet I could get $3,000 out of this job instead of it being like a $500 repair or something like that. So, and again, these are all built word of mouth. They're all built one customer at a time. They're all built one job at a time. And so you want to be able to walk away with that, with your business's name on that roof, and to say, hey man, if you got any questions, I will give you however many contacts you want to call, you know. And that really should be, if you're not familiar with the roofer that's in front of you, that really should be something that you're asking for. You should be asking for references. You know, can you give me 3 to 5 people, you know, and their number that I can reach back to and find out, you know, what their experience was, as opposed to if I don't have that network or that village of people to reach back to and go, hey, has anybody in this group used a good reputable roofer?
Yeah, a grassroots movement, essentially. I mean, you know, we don't just have, you know, thousands of dollars a month that they're out there in advertising.
Yeah.
I mean, and plus all that money has to be accounted for anyway. So another benefit of a smaller company, not necessarily a chuck and a truck, is that we're not spending money on advertising,
right?
Which translates to the cost of how much it takes to do your roof. So if you have a roofing company in mind and it's there because of you've seen them on TV, on radio, all these different things, well, you're paying for that.
Yeah, it's worked back into the price somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, we've got this budget of $10,000 a month that we put out for commercials and everything else. I mean, that's great that it lands a job, but that $10,000 is incorporated back into a pricing structure somewhere.
Exactly.
Right. So, and again, leading more credibility to that. I found what's amazing to me is this last set of storms that came through. I found out people that were doing roofing on the side I didn't even have a clue of. Like, you doing roofing? You know, they're like, yeah, you know, I just kind of do it on the side, or I've been working for this company for a while, and you know, I built this experience, so I kind of just do this as kind of a, you know, I helped a neighbor out, or I helped a friend out, or whatever. And I'm just like, wow, man, like, you know, there's a lot of folks that are doing it. Some do it really well, even like you said earlier, where you said it was a side hustle, right? Like, some people are doing it really well, even when it's a side hustle. But when you've now stepped away and you no longer use the word side hustle on it, and it's like, this is my business. I'm staking my name to it. This is what pays the bills. This is what puts food on the table. This is where I'm going to rely on my long-term longevity, right? And really kind of what brings us to these tables when we start doing these podcasts, talking about entrepreneurs who step out, start their own business. Everybody talking about, man, I'd love to be able to own my own business. Yeah. And it's all great until, you know, you got to come off of money that you're not expecting, or just getting that startup, that initial little kick in to let people know what it is that you're doing, and trying to, again, kind of penetrate a market that's saturated. And how do I wave my flag over here for people to be able to know who I am and what it is that I can do for them, that I can probably do at a much cheaper rate than the bigger businesses that are out there, like you said, that are spending tons of money on advertisement. They're on every other set of commercials that's running through on local, you know, TV and radio and all that kind of stuff. And that's not knocking those guys, and it's not sitting there saying that those guys don't have value in the community. But the reality of that is, like I said earlier, as a customer in multiple industries that I've sought, you know, I've sought services from. I'm not looking to be a number. I want to feel confident that the people who I am using are people that have my best interest in mind and are giving me the best value for my dollar, basically, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about eco-focused materials, and we kind of talked about what those materials look like. Now I want you to kind of speak to. We're talking about pricing differences, where you said literally we can do these things. So for people who are out there in the market that are going, okay, I didn't even know this was a thing, or I didn't even know that I should be focused on eco-friendly stuff. Or that it was an option for me to focus on eco-friendly stuff. In the long run here, in these particular deals where we can make these decisions, where we can go through the process of it's not going to cost me anything more to pick this material over this material. What are some of the other reasons that customers would want to select those materials outside of just being good for the environment? What are some other reasons? I know you were talking, and I don't think we touched on it very much, that you said one of the things that you try to do, which again, I hadn't thought about the process of it, and I think a lot of builders and guys that are doing this job don't think about it, but you were saying where you get the opportunity, you will try and recycle the old material that's coming off of the roof as well too, so that it doesn't end up just directly in a landfill. It can actually, most of these shingles that are coming off of houses can be recycled and used in some form or fashion somewhere else.
Absolutely, especially in the asphalt paving industry. So I'll back it up. Roughly 11 million tons of roofing waste gets sent to a landfill every year. So if even just a fraction of that was sent to a recycling facility to be, that asphalt gets recycled, gets sent to a paving company. They don't have to use what they call virgin asphalt.
Right.
So you're reusing material and then not having to produce a new material. So twofold there into producing the roads and everything like that. As far as the recycling process goes, we do have some recycling companies here in the Brazos Valley that offer that. It's not always available, and the pricing, it varies so much that we can't even just throw a ballpark number out there. It's such a case-by-case basis. And
so you've literally got to check pricing
every time
prior, yeah,
every time. And so that's one where we can bid a roof where every roof will be bid as a standard roof, and then we'll have options for any ventilation changes that need to be made or anything above and beyond. But that one, the recycling option, is one where it's a lot more involved, and it is, as far as sustainability goes, that's going to be the least cost effective part of the process. So it'll be definitely not for everyone, but the ones who want to make the biggest impact and have the ability to do that, we want to have that option for them. So that's where we kind of how we want to approach the recycling process for that.
And so you're not necessarily, like you said earlier, you're not necessarily stepping into a field that's new. The options for eco-friendly items are new, but you're not necessarily stepping into it. This is not new territory for putting a roof on a house. And like you said earlier, for you, we'll go outside of this. So we're not all inclusive and not all in right here at, just sustainable products as we're referring to the name or whatever. But the idea is we know we're in storm season. We know that there's probably several more storms based on what we've got that are going to probably bring some more stuff to the community. And so people who are out here who maybe get affected by those, or let's say, for example, with the housing market right now, housing market's on fire. You got guys now all of a sudden they're going, you know what, man, I've been thinking about, moving. I've been thinking about upgrading houses or whatever. And I'm moving out of my, 40-year-old house to move into a new house that I want to build or whatever. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden they've got something that's landed in their line of sight that they didn't think of. They get an inspection done on the house. Now all of a sudden the roof comes into question. It's something where, storm damage has brought it right to their front door and they don't have any other choice other than to have it repaired at that moment. Just, livability and all this other stuff. I've seen pictures that you've put up on your social media pages of like holes punctured in roofs, where, it literally went through everything.
Yes.
It went through the shingle, it went through the OBS, it went through the the sheeting material, everything, right?
Absolutely.
So you're talking about the power of these storms and the ability that it has to really do a lot of damage in a very short amount of time. You know, you're just sitting down there in your house, listening to it getting pounded on the top side going, oh my gosh, what are we going to have? You know, ideally what you'd want to do if you're in those roles, you know, whether it's you're needing it for, to get it fixed up so that you can sell it, whether it's you're needing it because you have storm damage or whatever, what you really want to see is reaching back to that roofer and just starting the conversation of like, hey, I'd really like to see if you could come out and take a look at what's going on up here. And that costs what?
It's free.
Yeah, $0, right? So, I mean,
Absolutely.
you get an opportunity to have you come out and walk up on there, take pictures of stuff. Even in some cases, you can show people probably from the ground. I'm sure you don't want to put people up on the roof with you, but from the ground where there are spots, or being able to mark some things that are up there where visibly you can say, okay, see where I, you know, circled this up here. This is a penetration point. This is a soft spot. This is a rotted spot, you know, whatever. And then being able to give that person the opportunity to go, okay, well, you know, if you're like anything else, you're not tied to a roofer, but you're thinking about a roofer, then what you want to do is give that opportunity also to go, okay, listen, I'm good with Robby hopping up there. Robby, I'd like to talk to maybe one or two more guys. Sure, absolutely. Go ahead. You know, you're more than welcome to contact me back afterwards. You know, if there's discrepancies or whatever, I'll be more than happy to help address those with you. I think the one thing is we talk about your house being your biggest investment. You don't want to be shortcutting in these particular deals.
Well, you're absolutely right. A house is not always, but typically the biggest investment that a person makes. Well, and if you think about it, your roof is the first line of protection for everything below it.
Yeah.
I mean, from sun, rain, wind, everything.
Yeah.
And typically that's where people try to shortchange or just go the cheapest route or really just don't worry about it all that much. But it's such a huge, huge part of it. Because, I mean, it doesn't matter how nice the stuff inside your house is if your roof's going to leak and you're going to get water damage and it's going to have to be replaced. And some things aren't replaceable, you know. So that's where, and roofing is just so, so important.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's also the one spot, like you said, nobody hops up there. Nobody really gets on the roof to check this stuff. Usually by the time you have damage up on the top somewhere, you're also in a situation now where you're typically not seeing it until something's showing. Like you're looking at them going, whoa, where'd that big old water spot come from that's on the roof? And you think about how much time had to happen in order for that to elapse, because that's typically not like a few drops and then all of a sudden it just soaks through. It's like...
It can start with one little drop that gets down onto your insulation,
right,
and it dries up and it never makes its way down to your ceiling. Well, then the longer that one spot is there, the nail starts to rust out or however, and it's more drops. And then eventually it could take months before it's enough drops to saturate through your insulation to then even create a spot. So by that time you could have decking damage and all sorts of different stuff.
Yeah, because the most common damage that's going to happen is really right up underneath. It's going to be right up underneath the shingles and typically right up underneath your tarping or whatever that you've used up underneath there, or synthetics, whatever you've put up underneath there. So again, this is kind of that opportunity that even if you're just in the field of just going, you know, my roof's like 20 years old, you know, I don't think I got any hail up there, but just a phone call or just even an opportunity to have you come out and just walk it. You know, and you are, hey man, it still looks good, man. I bet you've got another 5-10 years on that roof. You know, as opposed to walking down there and going, you know what, man, there's one spot in that far corner over there. I don't know if you've seen it, but you know, if you want to walk out back here with me, I'll show you. Take a little stick and poke at it a little bit, and all of a sudden it's just like falling down.
And it could be just a preventative maintenance, you know, because people don't think. I mean, honestly, you should have a professional roofer up there annually. Yeah. You know, during your spring cleaning process, you know, or during the fall, whenever you're having your gutters cleaned out, have a roofer out there to take a look, because there's so many weak points in a roof that can be something as simple as a fresh bead of caulk or a nail that's backed out in an exposed flashing that just needs to be hammered back down and some caulking on top. Yeah. So we'll get up there, I'll do a once over and I'll take pictures and then get back down and say, hey, this is what I found. Need to add some caulking right here. Need to drive these nails back down. Maybe even add a few more just because the flashing's kicked up. I've got the stuff with me right now. Let me go ahead and take care of that for you. And it's going to keep you from having those more severe issues down the road with the rotten decking and everything like that. So that's where the preventative maintenance part comes in it.
Yeah, and if you've got gutters on your roof or whatever, you were talking about like that clean out process, right? Like I was explaining to you about the damage that happened at my mom's old place where she had gutters all the way around. She had huge trees around the area. Mm-hmm. I literally, when I hopped up on the roof after having a roofer get up there and I hopped up on the roof behind, I was like, oh my gosh, like you couldn't see the gutter from the corner. All you could see was just this huge pile of leaves and sticks and everything else that was literally up onto the shingles. Mm-hmm. So you know that when that thing is backing up and the water's now no longer able to drain through your gutter or whatever, there's only one place for it to go. And that's going to be up and over the gutter, which is literally right there.
Or pile back up to the roof line itself.
Yeah.
Because everything is designed to shed water one direction.
Right, away.
Every roofing material, everything made for roofing is water supposed to go down, and that's just it. So anywhere that you have, we call them penetrations, anywhere that something sticks through the roof line, like an air vent or a hot pipe for your furnace or anything like that, those are leak-prone areas. Same thing with your valleys. That's where two roof pitches come together and the water rushes down. Well, now you have two different slopes, water running this way and this way, and going all sorts of different directions. Those are the places where you can get buildup from your tree debris and all those different things. And that's where that preventative maintenance comes in and making sure everything has that free flow of water to go out. And same thing with the gutters. It's supposed to hit the gutter, run down and out. If that gets obstructed, water goes places it's not supposed to.
Yeah.
And can affect all sorts of stuff.
I mean, obviously you want it running away from your property. So the other thing, and again, while you were saying this, and you're talking about penetrations into the roof, and the very first thing that came to my mind while I was sitting there listening to you say that was satellite dishes. Mm-hmm. You know, you get a company that, yeah, man, we'll come out. We'll be more than happy to put a satellite dish up for you. I know you're trying to get away from Sudden Link, and, we've got the best opportunity for you here, and we're going to put this on the back. And again, I would question, when's the last time, I've had satellite as well too at my houses, but when's the last time you had something installed by one of those guys and then you got up and checked behind them after they were done? I mean, ultimately for them, if you never get on your roof, which again, I would venture to bet that percentage of people that never get on their roof is probably 90, maybe higher.
If not more.
So now all of a sudden somebody goes up on your roof and they decide they're going to put a satellite dish right here in the middle of your roof. And, oh, yeah, I took care of it and everything. And I don't know if you've ever looked at a satellite dish installment, but it's not like, a couple of nails and that's the end of the story. I mean, they're putting huge lag bolts through, and hopefully they hit, 2x4s and everything else. And then hopefully when they're done, they've gone and sealed all of that up.
That's one of the biggest parts is the sealing part after, because there's the thing you don't want to see, which happens all the time. So I'm not knocking them. They're not roofers. They're not up there to pull shingles up, install a satellite dish, flash around it, do all those different things. They have a job to do from one spot to the next.
Yeah.
But what as a roofer, I would definitely prefer to not have a satellite dish on the roof line anywhere whatsoever.
Right.
Not saying that's a terrible thing, but problems can happen. Option number 2 from there would be to have them put it on the fascia board, which is just below the roof line. Right. They can have an angle bracket. But even that comes with the same thing. If they don't put the proper sealants, that fascia board can get rotted out.
Yep.
Issues can happen. Best case scenario, which you're going to see very few times especially because a technician doesn't want to, is going to be have that satellite on a pole, 4 to 5 feet away from your house.
Right.
They'll drive a pole down, have it up there. You don't want anything drilled into your home because problems can happen.
Yeah. Well, and it's typically not going to be handled in a fashion where they're looking at it going, look, I really want to make sure that this person's roof still continues to stay dry. And, they're just sitting there going, look, this is how I was trained to install these. So I put them in this way. I drilled 4 lag bolts right through the shingles and everything else because I know that I've got a board right here that I can go off of. You hop up there on top and all of a sudden realize that that's all they did was they just run lag bolts through there and no sealant put in there. And you think about where all that water runs and how it's designed to run off of your roof. There's no sealant around the bottom casing part of the stand that they've put that on, so water easily can run up underneath there. And if it can run up underneath there and they haven't sealed anything off, well, that means all it's got to do is just get to the lag bolt and then follow the lag bolt down into the wood.
Path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And you think that technician, a year down the road is actually going to call and say, hey, how did I do up there? Did that leak? No, that's out of sight, out of mind. They throw it up there, they're on down the road, and that's just what it is.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are doing 6 installs in a day, and they're trying to get on to the next one and, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of little things that can happen in this process. The gutters are probably the single most important ones to probably be checking every year. But to your point, and again, I've heard others say it as well too, it's important to get somebody on your roof once to twice a year to really check that. And that really kind of falls around that same line of where they're going through. If you're doing gutter cleanouts and stuff like that, hey man, let me get somebody just to walk it and make sure that it's good. Mm-hmm. And again, if I can get a roofer up on there, most people are not doing that. Why? Why would you not put somebody on your roof to go check it?
If you have someone available for
if I've got a roofer that I can call, like you're saying, you can call me out to check your roof, man. I'll come check it for free.
Because people, it's not something that it's not a conversation people typically have. Gutters, absolutely. Hey, twice a year you need to get up there, keep those gutters clean.
Right.
It's just a conversation that needs to be brought up more often for people to realize, oh yeah, you're right. If my gutters are compacted and full and can't drain, think about all the different components of your roof. It's a same exact thought process on that.
Yeah, and as you get into older material roof, you're talking about granules. Yeah. I knew I wasn't going to say it correctly, but talk about older roofs, and one of the things that tends to happen on older shingled roofs with those granules is they tend to run, right? Mm-hmm. So after a period of time, those start coming loose, and then they go into a gutter somewhere, the gutter's now blocked, and then that just back builds up in there. Enough of those granules built up over time, again, impedes the flow of the water going through the deal. Now all of a sudden you got a major tree around there, or bushes, things that blow around in your area that easily make it in there and chomp it all up, and now you got bigger problems than not. So for it not to cost anything to ask that roofer to go on the roof and double check it, and then again to have that relationship with that same roofer, just going, hey, listen, you mind if I call you out? 6 months, I'd like to maybe check it again. Sure, man, call me out. I mean, for you're up there for the purpose of two things. I want to make sure that I'm, again, building a relationship here. Need me on your roof? I'll be more than happy to go up there and tell you what's going on in your roof or not going on your roof. But then secondly, out of all that, if you've built that relationship and you're a go-to for that client or potential client, then now all of a sudden it's, hey man, you've checked this roof for me for the last 3 years, man, and now something's come up, so I'd like you to go ahead and take care of it and repair it for me. So it's you're essentially just doing the legwork on the front side, which hopefully then turns into something on the back side if that customer ever needs you.
Exactly.
So it gives you that opportunity. So let's talk about 2021. Okay, so you come back, you start up your business. I know we were talking about you're in the process right now of building your web page and getting that all up and ready to go. You've got the website, you've got the website address, but you're working on getting the page all built up and everything. And we'll talk here at the end about how people can contact you if they want to reach back to you. But in 2021, we've already started out here with really 2 major storms that have kind of come through in 4 months, really.
Yeah.
Which probably speaks to more coming, especially considering the fact that we typically don't get out of the woods on that here until about June, where it really starts kind of turning hot and stuff. But, here with these hailstorms and everything else, we're right here in the middle of it.
Yes.
And so a good opportunity that, as things are continuing to, and again, it just seems like here as of recent now, this thing will air probably in June, and we're having this conversation here at the end of April, but what I'm looking at is this is going to continue to happen. This is going to continue. You're going to continue to see these influxes of well, I say hopefully that you're going to continue to see influxes of rain and storm systems come through. But it seems like here as of recent, specifically this year, maybe just because it's coming off of 2020 and it needs to try and top 2020, I don't know.
Yep.
That the system seems to be a little bit more strong, a little bit more severe. So again, as these things are coming through, 2021, if you're a roofer in 2021 to start out, I mean, your year should be looking good. And so for other opportunities that are coming through where we know we're talking about the housing market and everything else, people looking to get out of their house, relocate, maybe even in some cases, COVID has put them in a situation where they've had to find work or a location job change out of town. And so as they're getting inspections done and things along those lines, and they're going to need somebody to potentially do repairs to make a house conditionable for sale. Now, all of a sudden, 2021 for most roofing companies, you're talking about going to Oregon and picking probably the worst year to go.
Absolutely.
But you've probably picked the best year to be able to start up a company for roofing.
Correct.
And so goals, hopes of things that you see here in 2021 coming that you'd like to see or that you hope is going to be available to you as you keep moving forward?
So we want to continue quality first and foremost. One of the worst things you can do for quality control is to get too big too fast.
Absolutely.
So we want to still have a personalized approach, have these conversations, take the time with each and every person, and not just on the front end, but the back end as well. We want to have crews that I've worked with for years. We don't want to start branching out and getting too big to where, we talked in pre-production about, it's all about the crews that you have and the people doing the work as far as the quality goes and the length of time that you've known them. And if you don't treat them right, you run out of people locally and you've got to go out of town. And you just, the level of service goes down, quality control just goes out the window. And so that's what we want to focus on is growing, but at a healthy pace. The sustainability aspect of it, we want to continue to find different ways to be more sustainable, again, without breaking the bank or doing anything outrageous.
Right.
The customer we met with yesterday actually gave us a great idea. He's like, you say you can do gutters. Do you have someone that can do a water retention? I was like, that's something that we need to look into to be something that we offer. Again, you don't have to change your lifestyle for anything, but if you have a water retention system, now you have a nitrogen water that he wanted to use for his garden that you can use more, and have more readily available. As far as the fleet goes, looking into, it's going to be way down the road, but, we don't have to drive big old smoky diesels. We have fleet trucks. We want to have something more eco-focused, maybe a little bit of, electric power involved with it, everything like that.
You're going to be driving Teslas around town or something.
Right. There's a lot of other truck companies that are, even Ford's going to be coming out with, not an all electric, but a hybrid and things like that.
I think this is, in the last year, I've probably seen more e-vehicles commercial wise, like even on TV. I've seen the one for a Hummer. I've seen the one for Chevy. Of course, I think everybody's waiting to see what Elon's going to do with his little his Cybertruck that's coming out or whatever. But and as the government continues to push regulations on going to less emissions, you're going to hear and see more talk about eco-friendly everything. From we're talking about roofs obviously here, but you're talking, vehicles are obviously at the forefront of a lot of that. And so again, it's kind of a natural progression as we continue to move forward.
And in that eco-focused part and the government trying to, push regulations, well, there's also benefits to that because you can get tax breaks for having Energy Star rated shingles, for solar powered attic fans, all these different things where, kind of our slogan or motto is the roof that puts money in your pocket. From the best ventilation and lowering your AC bills, but also ones that you can get a tax break for at the end of the year. So
why would you not?
Exactly.
Again, if it's something that you have to have done or something is going to come on your radar that you're going to need to get done, why would you not be looking at a situation that can then pay you back in the long run on that as well too?
Exactly.
So, well, man, I'm excited for you. I was telling you, I had so much to learn in this process, and one of the things I always try to do when I bring folks to the table here and we have a podcast is learn more about their business. And again, I think for most people, when they first see the name, it's the idea of, it's met with the paper straw kind of deal, like, oh, okay, here we go. But then getting you here and getting you an opportunity to talk about your business, talk about really what sustainability looks like, because sustainability has so many definitions to it. It's not just met with tree hugging,
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of the first kind of flip that everybody kind of goes to when you hear eco-friendly, you hear sustainability, you hear all of these things that kind of fall into those little umbrellas. But really what you're trying to do is you're still under the roofing umbrella. You're just branching out a little further over here to give other options.
Exactly.
And these, again, are other options that can be taken advantage of even if you're considering doing it anyway, but maybe this part was never even put on your map, the education part behind all of that to teach potential clients the whys, the hows, and like you said, once it's done, it's really almost out of sight, out of mind. It's like I don't even have to think about it anymore.
And it doesn't necessarily even have to be someone putting a new roof on. I completely forgot we haven't even touched base. It can be an existing roof that's been there for 10 years.
Right.
I can come in, do an evaluation on proper airflows and everything like that. Give options for adding in solar-powered vents, which is a simple process. Remove a few shingles, cut a hole. It's a self-flashing. You put it down there, put the shingles around it. No electrician involved. It runs on its own power, and you can see changes immediately on your cooling bills. Another reason why proper ventilation is so important, what people don't think about, is that a large portion of your AC system runs through your attic space. So the hotter it is in there, that the attic vents that you have going through the house, if it has a 40-foot run from your air handler to the room that it goes to, if it's passing through 160-degree air to get to that room, how much hotter is that air going to be versus if it's 120 up there?
Yeah.
Your AC is going to blow colder, not run as hot. I mean, so many ways that it helps.
Yeah, I mean, there's this line of sight that you've given today into things again that maybe doesn't even hit somebody's radar until we start talking about it. Where they're going, listen to this guy on the podcast. They're talking about roofing, but then he started talking about how he can cool my attic down, and my electric bill that I've been getting is pretty high. Yeah. And we're just right around the corner. By the time this does air, we will be in the part where it'll be, right major focus for people who are trying to save on their electric bill, trying to keep their AC from running so long, for such a long period of time at such a high process rate that then you got much bigger problems of trying to preserve your AC unit and your system to make sure that it all stays in good working condition, where again, you're saying the environment that's running through is something that you can go up and evaluate, and just to make sure, like, hey, let's make sure that all of this money that you invested into this is running through a process that you've invested into here as well too.
It can literally blow colder air just by having better ventilation. Have nothing to do with your actual AC system.
Yeah.
You can have a not very efficient system that, struggles, but when we get the ventilation correctly, then all of a sudden it's like, it just breathes easier. It gets there at the temperature it's supposed to. It doesn't lose that coolness by the time it reaches the room that it's going to.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. So, well, Robby, man, I appreciate you coming out again. So if people want to reach back to you and they want an opportunity to be able to talk to you about what services you offer, not just roofing, but services that you offer for the education part of this, to be able to just go up and check on some things, the attic controls and exhaust, everything that you may need to go and help somebody with, or to take that experience that you've been able to learn and bring that back down here into the South Texas market, they can reach you. Again, it's Sustainable Roofing LLC. This is Robby Wilkerson over here. If you want to email you, they email you at office@sustainableroofingllc.com, or they can reach you by phone. It's 979-204-8586.
You got it.
Hey, thanks for taking time out of your day, man, to come and talk about your business. Wish you the best of luck. I know you're in the environment to be able to do it, and this is definitely the year, I think, that you've picked you picked the worst year to relocate, and I think you've picked the best year to be able to start up a business. Hope that God continues to bless you and your family and give y'all an opportunity to show people in town who y'all are, what your business is about, and where you can go to kind of match them up to what their needs are, and doing great things for the environment in the process of all of that as well too. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
And we look forward to seeing bigger and better things out of you.
Wonderful.
Thanks for your time, Robby. We appreciate you guys joining us, and look forward to talking to you again on the next podcast. Have a great day.
Bye.